I was talking to the guys about you. I said, like, what are the movie moments that you remember most about Ben Stiller?
Some movies are remembered for their iconic scenes, while others are remembered for their unforgettable lines. There's something about Mary gave us both. Behind the laughs lies a vault of weird and surprising facts. This film has secrets from unexpected casting twists to bizarre on-set moments. Today, we're diving into 20 of them. Join us on this wild ride of behind-the-scenes discoveries. Number 20. Even Cameron Diaz and Ben Stiller were nervous about the hair gel scene. That scene in There's Something About Mary, which had the whole audience reeling with laughter, the hair gel scene, has been imprinted into pop culture's history. However, even the stars acting in the scene did not accept it. They were not sure it would work. Cameron Diaz admitted in interviews that she had serious concerns about filming the scene. She worried that it might be too gross and may even be offensive. She also felt that the audience wouldn't laugh but would rather be made to feel uncomfortable. She trusted the Farrelly brothers' instincts when it came to comedy. However, she knew it was also a significant risk for her career, especially as she was still building her reputation in Hollywood. Ben Stiller, on the other hand, also had his hesitation. He understood the joke but wondered if viewers would find it shocking rather than funny. He even said that later, when they shot the scene, nobody was completely confident it would land the way the Farrellys had hoped. Being cast, they went through with the script despite their initial hesitations, and the test screening audience could not stop laughing, proving them wrong. Weirdly, the most iconic scene in the entire movie had the two major stars as scared, if not even more scared than the studio executives. Number 19. Matt Dillon's fake teeth became a running joke on set. Pat Healy, played by Matt Dillon, was a sleazy private investigator. One look at him. If you've met him before, it is not difficult to recognize him. Why? He had a pair of 32 ridiculously looking fake teeth. The veneers were custom-made for the film to give Healy a creepy, almost cartoonish smile that matched his shady personality. The teeth were so exaggerated that they became a running joke on set. Dillon would put them in even when the cameras were not rolling, just to humor crew members or stay in character ready for the next scene as the confident Healy. According to the Farrelly brothers, Dillon loved the fake teeth so much that he kept them even after the movie production was over. He was alleged to have even worn them during press interviews as a gag. It was peculiar because, even though they added a final touch to a character who was supposed to appear as if he was trying too hard to be charming, it made him look ridiculous. Number 18. The dogfight scene took weeks to perfect. One of the epic moments in There's Something About Mary is the chaotic fight between Ted and Puffy the dog. It is a fast, ridiculous fight. Ben Stiller is wrestling a furious little dog. However, hers is what remains unknown to many. That short scene that made you wonder what was wrong with Ted took weeks of planning and multiple techniques to finally pull it off safely. The crew introduced a mix of trained real dogs, animatronics, and stuffed puppets to create the illusion. It was a lightweight puppet for the parts where Puffy attacked, so Stiller could easily throw it around without hurting the real dog. As for close-up parts where Puffy barked and growled, a trained dog was used instead. This dog, however, had to be taught special movements, and for the near-impossible gags of throwing it out the window, a completely fake stunt version of the dog was used. Even though they sound simple, these scenes are so complex that they took far longer to shoot than anyone expected. The Farrelly brothers even joked that directing the dog was more complicated than directing the actors. Eventually, all efforts paid off, as that scene became one of the film's most talked-about parts. Number 17. Charles Farrelly auditioned to play Warren. The protective brother of Mary, Warren, is one of the movie's most loved characters. However, you might not know that Chris Farrelly, the only legendary SNL comedian, auditioned to play Warren. Farrelly was known then for his wild, larger-than-life comedy in Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. Hence, the reason for the Farrelly brothers' intrigue was to see what he would bring to Warren. Unfortunately, they did not choose him, but instead went for W. Earl Brown because he gave the character a more grounded sweetness. The Farrellys wanted Warren to feel honest and sincere, not just a comedic caricature of what they wanted him to represent. Now imagine that Chris had won the role. How different would the tone of the movie have been? Would his presence in the film have taken the role to the next level? Well, we would never know. As if to further sadden the situation, Chris passed away just a year before the movie's release in 1997. However, his audition remains one of the what could have been moments in comedy history. Number 16. The Beans and Frank's line became a pop culture phenomenon. A line from There's Something About Mary stuck in everyone's head, even long after the movie. The line, "How do you get the beans above the Frank?" remained iconic for years. The line shouted during Ted's zipper accident scene perfectly sums up the ridiculousness of the moment. What remained unexpected by both the Farrelly brothers and anyone else was how much that single line would take on a life of its own. After the movie's release, people started quoting the line everywhere. On television stations, in late-night comedy monologues, and even sports broadcasts as a cheeky joke. It became one of those instantly recognizable catchphrases like "Show me the money" from Jerry Maguire or "I am king of the world" from Titanic. It would even find its way to novelty t-shirts and comedy sketches. For a while, once the discussion on the movie started, someone would laugh and repeat that particular line. It is weird because a single line, which was only a minor part of mainstream dialogue, could become legendary when paired with an unforgettable visual. Number 15. The singing narrators were performing live on set. One of the most charming and unexpected touches in There's Something About Mary is the brief musical interlude that appears throughout the film. In narration, they appear as two guys playing the guitar and singing about Ted and Mary's story like a live soundtrack. The weird part is that they were not just lip-syncing, they performed live on set. The musicians included Jonathan Richman, an iconic indie singer-songwriter. His drummer was Tommy Larkins. Richman was known for his heartfelt music with the Modern Lovers, and the Farrelly brothers were longtime die-hard fans of the musician. Instead of recording the songs separately and dubbing them later, they had Richman and Larkins physically appear in scenes and play the music in real time. This gave the movie a unique, almost storybook vibe. Richman would stand off camera, strumming and singing, sometimes even subtly reacting to the actors. It was not something you would see in a mainstream comedy, but it added a surreal layer that people still remember today. This would also shed more light on Jonathan Richman's music. Number 14. An iconic scene was almost removed by the studio. One of the most famous scenes in There's Something About Mary, the hair gel moment, almost did not make it to the final cut. When the studio executives first saw the scene where Ted's semen accidentally ended up in Mary's hair, they panicked. They thought it was a gross scene and would turn the audience off completely. The Farrelly brothers had to fight to ensure it was not removed from the movie. They argued that it was precisely the shockingly funny moment that would make the film stand out. To make a decision, they decided to show the scene to their test audience, and the reaction was immediate. The people laughed so hard that they missed the following lines of dialogue. That convinced the studio to let it stay. Today, it is the one scene easily remembered in the movie. It is one of the most iconic and imitated scenes in comedy history. It proves that sometimes the riskiest jokes are easily remembered forever. Number 13. The role several dogs played, Puffy. Another unforgettable character in There's Something About Mary is not a human character, but a little dog with a big attitude. It was named Puffy, fitting for a dog that was so highly regarded. However, the Puffy that got featured on the screen was different every time it appeared. It was not just one dog. The filmmakers used multiple versions of the dog to pull off Puffy's wild moments. There were trained real dogs for simple shots, stuffed puppets for moments when Puffy needed to look unconscious, and even another puppet to play the top gags. An instance of this is when Puffy is accidentally launched out the window in a fight. The Farrelly brothers explained that there was no way a single real dog could handle all of the stunts safely. A team of animal trainers, prop designers, and puppeteers collaborated to create Puffy's seamless scene. Members of the audience could not tell the difference between the real dog and the fakes, which made the jokes even funnier. Puffy became so popular among the fans that people began to ask if the dog was available for interviews during the press tour. The real Puffy stayed off the red carpet, but has never been forgotten for its role in the movie. Number 12. Plantation, Florida, asked not to be thanked in the movie credits. Most cities are thrilled when a Hollywood production films on their street, but not Plantation, Florida. Some parts of There's Something About Mary were shot on their roads, and one would think that the local government would want a little credit. Their town's city hall was disguised as Rhode Island's Cumberland High School, and the plantation was paid $2,500 for its services. The city council president was a conservative Catholic who had refused to see the movie after he read some reviews about it. He believed that the filmmakers had misled the council. To this end, they made an irrevocable decision. They specifically requested that the filmmakers not thank them in their credits. The plantation officials were unsure how the public would react to the film's outrageous, raunchy humor. This movie was shot in the late 90s, and Mary was packed with scenes that could turn heads, such as the zipper mishap, the infamous hair gel scene, and the flying dog. These scenes were unsuitable at the time to be categorized as a typical family-friendly movie. The council worried they might reflect poorly on the town's image. So, in honor of their requests, the Farrelly brothers left the plantation out of the credits when it was time to finalize their special thanks list. It is one of those rare cases where a city did not want the free publicity that comes with being part of a hit film. That in itself was weird. Number 11. The movie was packed with family members. The Farrelly brothers are generally known for keeping their filmmaking process close to home. The movie There's Something About Mary featured family members playing various roles. The movie cast included their mother, siblings, and even cousins in minor roles throughout the film. This was not the first time they had cast their family members in their movies. Their family was always involved in one way or another, either behind the scenes or on screen. That is how they maintain a fun and personal atmosphere on set. In Mary, their family members played extras in background scenes, townspeople, and some party guests in flashback moments. They have said in interviews that making filmmaking a family affair helps to keep them grounded. For instance, Bobby Farrelly's wife, Nancy, was the woman who asked about class actions. The characters, Docky and his wife, were played by the Farrelly's parents. Even Cameron Diaz's father was the long-haired prison mate in the movie. Number 10. Tucker was secretly a British comedian faking an American accent. Tucker, Mary's seemingly charming but slightly mysterious friend, was one of the movie's most memorable supporting characters. However, many American viewers were unaware of this. Tucker was played by a British comedian, Lee Evans, who had to create a fake American accent for the entire role. At the time, Lee Evans was already a massive name in the UK, and he had made an enormous name for himself in stand-up comedy by the time he joined the cast. He was known to be incredibly energetic and had an almost cartoonish stage presence. He also made frantic movements, exhibited wild facial expressions, and engaged in non-stop physical humor. He was often referred to as the British Jim Carrey due to the animated nature of his performances. At the time, the Farrelly brothers were ready to cast for the role of Tucker in There's Something About Mary. They wanted someone who could do physical comedy without overshadowing the film's main characters. Evans was a perfect fit. His awkward body language made the character Tucker both funny and suspicious. However, there was one problem. Tucker was British. Evans had to ditch his natural British accent to sell the idea that Tucker was a friend of Mary's from America. While U.S. citizens watched his performance, no one could tell that they were watching a British comedian pretending to be American. This demonstrated that he was highly skilled in his craft. However, a film critic called Lee Evans's accent in the movie the worst fake British accent ever in a film. Interestingly, There's Something About Mary was one of Evans' few major Hollywood roles. After this film and a handful of other U.S. projects, he primarily returned to the UK comedy circuit. Number 9. Cameron Diaz and Matt Dillon were dating during the filming. Many were surprised to learn that Cameron Diaz and Matt Dillon were romantically involved while filming There's Something About Mary. While the chemistry between their characters was undeniable, few realized that a real-life romance had been blooming quietly behind the scenes. Their relationship had already begun before the movie went into production, and by the time cameras started rolling, Diaz and Dillon were one of Hollywood's rising star couples, quietly but unmistakably garnering buzz from the entertainment press and insiders alike. The dramatic irony playing out on screen made the situation particularly intriguing. In the film, Dillon plays Pat Healy, a shady, mustached private investigator hired to track down Mary. Healy is far from charming. He's sleazy, manipulative, and dishonest, doing everything from spying on Mary to lying about being an architect who rescues disabled children, all in a desperate attempt to win her affection. Meanwhile, Diaz's Mary is portrayed as a genuinely kind and lovable woman who unknowingly deceives this morally questionable man. So while audiences were laughing at Healy's ridiculous antics and rooting for Mary to find true love, behind the scenes, the two actors playing those roles were in an honest and affectionate relationship. That bizarre duality, romance off-screen and sabotage on-screen, gave their scenes a strange kind of tension that, in hindsight, only added to the movie's quirky charm. In later interviews, Matt Dillon openly reflected on how surreal it was to play such a ridiculous and frankly unpleasant character while being in love with the woman he was constantly lying to on screen. He described the experience as fun but odd, noting that the Farrelly brothers' absurd, over-the-top humor made it easier for Dillon to step into the role without taking himself too seriously. For Dillon, who had mostly taken on dramatic or challenging guy roles before then, There's Something About Mary was a departure, and doing so alongside his then-girlfriend made the process all the more unusual. Ever the professional, Cameron Diaz approached the situation with grace and clarity. Despite the awkwardness of their characters' dynamic, she never let their real-life relationship interfere with her performance. Many who worked on the set praised her for her unwavering professionalism. She fully embodied Mary, carefree, intelligent, and endlessly endearing, without letting her personal life overshadow the work. Her ability to separate personal emotions from on-screen responsibilities was a testament to her talent and maturity, especially considering she was still relatively new to the Hollywood A-list. Sadly, their off-screen romance didn't stand the test of time. Not long after the film was released and became a massive hit, Diaz and Dillon quietly went their separate ways. Reports from the time suggest that Dillon, who had always been more low-key and private, struggled with the increased attention from dating someone who had suddenly become one of Hollywood's most desirable stars. Diaz's career exploded after There's Something About Mary, catapulting her to international fame. Her quirky charm and comedic timing made her a household name almost overnight. At the same time, Dillon chose to retreat into more serious, introspective roles, keeping a distance from the rom-com spotlight that Diaz now dominated. Their breakup, though unfortunate, never turned messy or public. They remained respectful of one another, and neither aired their grievances to the media. But for a brief period, they were one of the most talked-about couples in the industry, their relationship adding an extra layer of fascination to a film already bursting with unexpected charm and wild comedy. After their split, fans and tabloids continued referencing the unique irony of their love story, the wholesome Mary and the duplicitous Healy, being lovers off camera. In the grand narrative of There's Something About Mary, the romance between Diaz and Dillon is just another twist in a movie filled with surprises. But unlike the film's gags, it was a real relationship that, although short-lived, played a small but unforgettable role in one of the most iconic comedies of the 1990s. Number 8. The pain in Ted's crotch was inspired by a real-life happenstance. Some of the funniest moments in There's Something About Mary came from Ted's unfortunate run-ins with zippers and low blows. However, not all of those funny moments were born from just acting. From the set, during the shoot of the infamous crotch scene, Ben Stiller got hit for real. His reaction was so painfully honest and relatable that the Farrelly brothers decided to keep that exact take in the movie. Also, the stunt crew dropped him when Ted was carried out on a stretcher after his zipper accident. Yet that was not a part of the script at all. The directors immediately had to yell cut to determine whether Stiller was okay. Upon discovering it wasn't serious, they kept that blooper scene in the movie because it was too funny. The idea for the zipper disaster was not in itself just an abstract. It was something that had occurred in real life. At a teenage party the Farrelly brothers organized, one guest was unlucky when he used their restroom. Unfortunately, he had caught himself in his zipper, and the Farrelly parents had to step in and help the boy. This little incident thus gave way to one of the movie's iconic scenes. It is safe to say that both the pain on Ted's face and the inspiration behind the crotch getting caught up in the zipper were real. Number 7. The movie almost got an NC-17 rating. In the movie world, the Farrelly brothers were already known for pushing past the limits of comedy. However, with There's Something About Mary, they almost overstepped the bounds for a favorable Hollywood rating. The earlier cuts of the movie were so outrageous that the Motion Picture Association of America considered giving it an NC-17 rating. This would have killed the film's potential for release and box office success. The directors trimmed a few seconds between several parts to prevent this disaster, especially from the more explicit jokes. For instance, several scenes were cut from the infamous gel scene, earning the movie an R rating instead. Those little edits here and there saved the film from a near disaster. Imagine if it were unable to reach mainstream theaters. It wouldn't have had the privilege to reach the mainstream audience. It would have even killed its potential to become a massive success as it did. Number 6. To prepare for Mary's character, Cameron Diaz visited her old high school. Cameron Diaz went the extra mile to capture Mary's approachable next-door vibe. She visited her old high school in Long Beach, California, Long Beach Polytechnic High School. While there, she attempted to reconnect with the kind of everyday charm the Farrelly brothers had envisioned for the character. She went on to observe her old classmates, revisit the hallways, and practice being a teenage girl for the prom flashback scenes at the beginning of the movie. She channeled all the positive energy she got from here. Her natural and friendly energy during her adolescent years led to her acting career. The subtle preparation paid off. She felt real, like the very woman everyone in the movie could genuinely be drawn to, not some fantasy. Number 5. Cameron Diaz played double roles. Cameron Diaz is famously known for lighting up the screen as Mary Jensen in There's Something About Mary, the bright, beautiful, and effortlessly charming woman every man in the film seems to fall for. Her portrayal was magnetic, balancing innocence, wit, and likability in a way that made Mary not just the object of desire, but a character viewers genuinely rooted for. However, most people don't realize that Diaz didn't just play the titular role. She also quietly stepped into another completely uncredited part in the same film. That's right, Cameron Diaz pulled double duty, and the second role was nothing like the first. In one of the film's bustling crowd scenes, Diaz makes a blink, and you'll miss it appearance as a background extra. No glamorous lighting, no dialogue, no front and center attention. A face in the crowd blended in among the scene's chaos. It was a hidden cameo, a playful Easter egg that only the most eagle-eyed fans would ever spot. The idea wasn't born out of necessity, but from a moment of spontaneous fun. According to later interviews, it was a lighthearted decision between Diaz and the Farrelly brothers. They were always known for their offbeat humor and fondness for including quirky surprises in their films. The double-role cameo became an inside joke between Diaz and the filmmakers. It wasn't meant to add to the plot or dazzle viewers. It was simply for fun. And that sense of fun makes it so perfectly fitting for a movie like There's Something About Mary, where surprise gags, outrageous moments, and left-field humor are woven into the fabric of every scene. For Diaz, it was an opportunity to let loose, to join in on the behind-the-scenes madness without the pressure of leading a scene. She later recalled how much she enjoyed disappearing into the background, trading her star power for anonymity for a day. In many ways, it allowed her to participate in the collective joy and absurdity of the film from a whole new angle. Her uncredited cameo wasn't about recognition or applause, but about being a part of every layer of the filmmaking experience. Diaz was at the film's center as its emotional and comedic anchor, but her hidden background showed how deeply she connected with the movie and the people who made it. It was a gesture of camaraderie and enthusiasm, a sign that she wasn't just acting for the paycheck or the publicity, but because she genuinely loved being on that set. Interestingly, this little detail never made it into the official credits, and even fans who watched the movie dozens of times often missed it. It wasn't until years later that Diaz confirmed her secret appearance, smiling as she revealed the story during interviews. The cameo didn't need to be noticed to be meaningful. What mattered was the spirit behind it. For Diaz, it was a reminder that even as the movie's shining star, she could step into the shoes of the unnoticed and the ordinary and still have just as much fun. In retrospect, the hidden background role adds another layer to the magic of There's Something About Mary. It reflects the energy of a film where the cast and crew weren't just working, they were playing. And Cameron Diaz, with all her charisma and stardom, didn't need the spotlight to shine. She brought joy to the process even when tucked in the background, proving that sometimes the best moments are the ones no one sees. Number 4. Brett Favre was not even the second choice for Mary's ex. Brett Favre's cameo as Mary's ex-boyfriend was a funny twist in the movie's final act. However, hilarious as it may have been, Favre was not the first or second choice for the character he played. The Farrelly brothers originally wrote the role for San Francisco 49ers quarterback Steve Young, hoping that he would play up his clean-cut image. However, Steve turned it down due to concerns about the movie's raunchy humor and how the movie would tarnish his image as a devout Mormon. After Steve passed, they pursued New England Patriots star Drew Bledsoe, but he also declined the offer. Finally, they approached Brett Favre, who at the time was the NFL's biggest star, and he agreed to play the role. Ultimately, his appearance in the movie resulted in a wholly unexpected but iconic cameo, with audiences roaring with laughter. His willingness to poke fun at himself is unmatched. His acting helped to make the end of the movie one of the most memorable in romantic comedy history. Number 3. There was a golf rivalry among members of the cast. Although the movie premiered with its outrageous and excessive comedy, the cast behind the scenes was actually obsessed with playing golf. While filming in Florida, Ben Stiller, Matt Dillon, Cameron Diaz, and the Farrelly brothers often went to the golf course to play on their days off. While on the course, their play wasn't just for fun like most people. It was always a competitive experience whenever they got together. There were also friendly wagers that sometimes ended with bruised egos. It also became a running joke that golf talk made its way into their downtime between shoots. One thing was sure, Diaz loved golfing and looked like she could golf. At least Peter affirms that Diaz had a better swing than the golfer hired to stand in for her. However, although Matt Dillon's father had worked as a golf coach, the Farrellys would later state that Dillon was not much of a golfer. The Farrellys would mention in interviews that the skill levels for golfing were hilariously mismatched. According to them, some were naturals, while some could barely make contact with the ball. It is weird but amusing to see that the stars were filming some of comedy's wildest history by day and casually just golfing the stress off in the evenings. It gave them a massive sense of balance in the world. This little activity had a profound impact on reducing the stress levels of the actors. Number 2. Jon Stewart almost played Ted Strowman. The Farrelly brothers had their eyes on popular comedian Jon Stewart for the awkward but lovable Ted Strowman role. At the time, he had been on the cusp of becoming the host of The Daily Show, but he was in serious talks to play Ted even though he was untested as a romantic lead at the time. He went as far as auditioning for the role, but was replaced by Ben Stiller, as the Farrelly brothers felt that Ben had the right mix of nervous charm and physical comedy to pull off the most outrageous scenes in the movie. For instance, scenes like the prom zipper disaster and the bathroom hair gel mix-up. Even more interesting was that Stewart was not the only other person to audition for the role of Mary's admirer, Ted. It is recorded that the directors also considered Owen Wilson and even Matthew Broderick. Now, looking back to the options they had to pick from, Ben Stiller was the perfect candidate for the role, especially as he brought an ideal balance of cringeworthy moments and a heart that made Ted a relatable underdog, surviving the humiliating moments he had to endure on screen, the way Stiller did. Number 1. It surprisingly became a box office smash. Surprisingly, There's Something About Mary was never intended to be a significant hit, at least not in the eyes of the studio executives who nervously watched it take shape. Most insiders believed the film was far too outrageous, risky, and vulgar for mainstream audiences. The late 1990s were still a relatively cautious time in Hollywood regarding crude or edgy humor, and no one was certain how far was too far. At the time, the Farrelly brothers, Peter and Bobby, had already carved out a niche with their slapstick, offbeat comedic style in hits like Dumb and Dumber and Kingpin. But while Dumb and Dumber had been a breakthrough, Kingpin was a commercial disappointment. That failure loomed like a shadow over their next project. The tension behind the scenes during the development of There's Something About Mary was immense. If this film didn't land with audiences, it could have marked the end of their careers as filmmakers. With that pressure mounting, the Farrelly brothers made a bold, all-or-nothing decision. Instead of playing it safe, they did the opposite. They went for broke. They poured into this film every wild idea, absurd gag, and taboo-bending joke they'd ever dreamed of including in a comedy, whether it was acceptable or not. No comedic frontier was off-limits, from the infamous hair gel scene to the awkward zipper mishap. This wasn't just a movie, but a final swing at redemption and survival. The gamble was enormous, and many critics initially panned the film for its crude, over-the-top humor. But then something unexpected happened. Audiences loved it. Despite the early skepticism and raised eyebrows from Hollywood insiders, There's Something About Mary became an unstoppable hit. Produced on a relatively modest budget of just $23 million, the film shocked everyone by raking in an astronomical $369 million and 9 cents at the worldwide box office. It didn't just do well, it crushed expectations, outperforming big-budget blockbusters and climbing to become one of the top 5 highest-grossing films of 1998. It was also a rare phenomenon, an R-rated comedy that became a mainstream global success, attracting young adults, older viewers, and even those who typically shied away from edgy humor. The movie's impact was seismic, not just financially but culturally. It helped redefine what audiences would laugh at and opened the door for future boundary-pushing comedies in the 2000s. For the Farrelly brothers, the success was career-saving. Instead of becoming cautionary tales of filmmakers who flew too close to the sun, they became pioneers of a new comedic era. Proof that taking creative risks could still pay off. There's Something About Mary didn't just change the trajectory of the Farrelly brothers. It launched Cameron Diaz into Hollywood superstardom, transforming her into one of the most in-demand actresses of her time. It also elevated Ben Stiller from a quirky supporting actor into a bona fide leading man. Audiences fell in love with his neurotic charm, his uncanny timing, and his willingness to be the butt of every joke, all trademarks that would later define his career in films like Meet the Parents and Zoolander. Ultimately, what makes There's Something About Mary such a fascinating story is the film and its journey to existence. A film that nearly wasn't made, directed by two brothers whose careers teetered on the edge, became a pop culture classic that left a lasting mark on the comedy genre. In hindsight, it wasn't just something about Mary, it was everything. Which of these weird facts is more hilarious? Share in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.